I
Watch your
stood in
head,
my
ma'am.
father's
Step
living
inside.
room on a
I
gray
didn't do
November afternoon in
anything.
We'll get you a statement
2023,
at the precinct.
2
Let's
years
go.
after we buried him, staring at the empty
How
walnut
could you
cabinet
keep
he'd
this
built
from
with
me
his
for
own
so
hands in
long?
1985.
Everything I thought I knew
Rain
was a
drummed against
lie.
the
How am
windows
I
of the
supposed to
colonial
trust
house in
you
McLean,
now?
Virginia. The same rain that had fallen the day we lowered his casket into the ground. 23 circular impressions remained on the red velvet lining where his watches had rested, each one a shadow of something irreplaceable. The cabinet door hung open like a mouth frozen mid-scream. A piece of pink notepaper lay where the centerpiece Rolex Submariner should have been. The handwriting was Patty's, looping and careless as always, written in glitter gel pen like she was 15 instead of 66. Sold them all. You never cared anyway. Split the money with me, or I'm telling everyone you abandoned Dad. Patty. My fingers went cold. The house settled around me with a creak of old wood, and somewhere in the basement, the furnace kicked on with a rattle my father had always meant to fix. The air still carried traces of his Old Spice aftershave, mixed with the musty smell of old books lining the shelves. Dust particles drifted through weak light, filtering past lace curtains my mother had hung 30 years ago. The oak floorboards beneath my sneakers groaned with each step, the same boards I'd walked across as a child, learning to tread softly so as not to disturb him when he worked. I wore my usual uniform, faded jeans from Costco, a gray cardigan with a small hole near the left cuff, New Balance sneakers 3 years past their prime. My hair, more silver than brown now, hung in a practical bob that required nothing more than a quick brush each morning. No makeup, no jewelry except the $40 Timex on my wrist. I'd learned long ago that invisibility was a choice, and choices were power. The cabinet had been his sanctuary. He'd spent 40 years in Army intelligence, rising to colonel before retirement, and every watch told a story he'd never fully shared. Some came from fellow officers, gifts marking promotions or completed missions. Others he'd found in estate sales and pawn shops, drawn to the weight of history they carried. The Submariner had been different. He'd kept it separate from the others, locked in a smaller box within the cabinet, and on the rare occasions I'd asked about it, his face would close like a door swinging shut. Classified, Catherine. That's all you need to know. I moved through the house, checking each room with the methodical precision 38 years in the Defense Intelligence Agency had drilled into my bones. The master bedroom remained untouched since his death. The bed made with military corners, his reading glasses still on the nightstand next to a Tom Clancy novel marked with a receipt from 2021. The bathroom smelled faintly of Barbasol. His closet held pressed shirts and polished shoes, arranged with the exactitude of a man who'd never stopped being a soldier. Nothing else was missing, just the watches. I returned to the cabinet and knelt on the hardwood, running my fingers along the velvet impressions. 23 watches. I'd helped him catalog them 6 months before the dementia took hold, sitting at the same cabinet while he told me specifications and manufacture dates in a voice already beginning to thin. His hands had trembled as he lifted each piece, cradling them with a gentleness I'd rarely seen him show toward anything else. These represent something, Catherine. Honor, sacrifice, time itself, measured in moments that matter. The pink note crumpled in my fist. Patty had been in this house. She'd stood where I stood now, looked at what our father had treasured most, and decided it was hers to take. The violation felt intimate and cold, like discovering a stranger had slept in your bed and left the sheets warm. My phone buzzed. I pulled it from my pocket and saw 17 missed calls from Patty's number, scattered across the last 2 days. No voicemails, no texts. Just the desperate drumbeat of someone who knew exactly what she'd done and was waiting for me to discover it. I didn't call back. Instead, I walked to the small den off the kitchen where my father had kept his files, the room that smelled perpetually of pipe tobacco even though he'd quit smoking in 1994. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall, each drawer labeled in his precise block lettering. I found what I needed in the third drawer down, under estate documents. The will was straightforward. Everything split 50-50 between his 2 daughters, the house, the savings account, the personal effects. But there was a codicil, added 3 months before he died in early 2021, when the dementia had progressed enough that his lawyer had required a doctor's clearance for him to sign anything. The watch collection is to be managed jointly by both daughters. No individual piece may be sold without written consent from both parties. The collection must remain intact as a family legacy. He'd known, even through the fog of his failing mind, he'd known that Patty would try something like this. He'd known, and he'd tried to protect what mattered. I photographed every page with my phone, then returned the will to its folder. The rain intensified, sheets of water now obscuring the view of the overgrown backyard where my father had taught me to change a tire when I was 16. Patty had watched from the porch, bored, filing her nails and complaining that Dad was wasting his time teaching me boy things. You should learn this too, Patricia. Why? I'll just marry someone who knows how. She had eventually. Thomas Chen, a dentist with soft hands and a softer spine who'd given her 2 children and a comfortable life in Baltimore before the divorce 8 years ago. She'd walked away with $340,000 and blown through it like dandelion fluff in a windstorm. Shopping sprees, loans to her son Marcus for business ventures that collapsed within months, a timeshare in Florida she'd visited once, and when the money ran out, she'd started calling me. Can you help with the electric bill? Just this once. Marcus needs $5,000 for inventory. It's a sure thing this time. I think I need to file bankruptcy. Can you loan me money for a lawyer? I'd helped. God knows I'd helped. $30,000 in 2019 for what she called an emergency, never defined, never repaid. $15,000 in 2020 for Marcus's second failed startup, smaller amounts scattered across the years, each one accompanied by promises she'd never kept and gratitude that evaporated the moment the check cleared. But that had been before I understood that helping Patty wasn't kindness. It was enabling. I locked the house and drove back to Arlington through rain that turned the highway into a river of brake lights. My apartment was a modest 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building I'd bought in 2015, though no one in my family knew I owned the entire structure. 6 units, 4 rented at market rate, 1 occupied by me, 1 kept vacant for storage. The monthly income more than covered the mortgage and maintenance, with enough left over to funnel into index funds that had been growing steadily for years. I parked my 15-year-old Camry in the lot and climbed the stairs, my keys already in hand. The apartment smelled like the lavender sachets I kept in the linen closet, a small luxury I allowed myself. The furniture was simple. A gray couch from IKEA, a coffee table I'd found at a yard sale, a bookshelf lined with intelligence analysis texts, and a few novels I reread when I couldn't sleep. The kitchen was clean, efficient, organized with the precision of someone who'd lived alone for a long time and preferred it that way. I made tea and sat at the small dining table that served as my desk. My laptop hummed to life. The search terms came easily after decades of research training. Vintage military watches for sale, Rolex Submariner 1967, CIA provenance. The results appeared like accusations. The third link down was a listing on Chrono24, a marketplace I knew well. High-end collectors used it. So did people trying to flip stolen goods. Rare Rolex Submariner 1967, Refer 5PI13, CIA provenance. Price, $1,800,000. Seller, watches, forever Baltimore condition. Excellent original dial, authenticated paperwork. Description: from the estate of a retired Army colonel. Unique CIA operational history. Complete with documentation proving chain of custody. Serious inquiries only. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. 38 years of maintaining operational composure under pressure had taught me that panic was a choice, and I chose otherwise. But something cold and sharp settled in my chest. Something that felt like clarity. I clicked through to the seller's profile. Joined 3 months ago. 22 items sold in rapid succession. All vintage military watches ranging from $500 to $40,000. Location listed as Baltimore, Maryland. No reviews yet, which meant the account was too new, or the transactions had been completed off-platform to avoid fees. I opened a second tab and searched for Patty's address. She'd moved twice since the divorce, each apartment smaller and cheaper than the last. The current place was a rented condo in a complex near the Inner Harbor, the kind of building with thin walls and parking spots you had to fight for. The photographs of the Submariner showed it resting on a velvet cloth, the same deep red as the lining in my father's cabinet. The dial was pristine, the patina on the case exactly as I remembered. And there, in the corner of one photo, barely visible, was the small scratch near the crown that my father had pointed out to me years ago. Battle damage, Catherine. Earned in Beirut, 1983. I saved every image. documented the listing URL, the seller name, the description. Then I opened my email and composed a message to an address I hadn't used in 4 years, not since I'd formally retired from the DIA. "Sarah, I need a favor, it's urgent." The reply came within an hour. Sarah Rodriguez had been my colleague for 12 years, rising through the ranks of intelligence analysis before transferring to the FBI's art crime team 5 years ago. We'd worked together on a case involving stolen antiquities, and she'd offered me a consulting position I'd politely declined. Retirement was supposed to mean retirement. "Kate, whatever you need, send me the details." I outlined everything: the watches, the will, the listing, the timing. I attached the photographs and the documentation. Then I added one more detail, the one that transformed this from a family dispute into something else entirely. The Submariner wasn't just my father's watch. According to his classified records, it belonged to a CIA operative who died on a mission in 1983. The watch was recovered as part of an investigation I'm not fully cleared to discuss. It may still contain sensitive materials. If it's been sold to a foreign national, we have a security problem. 3 hours later, my phone rang with a Virginia area code I didn't recognize. "Ms. Morrison, this is Special Agent Marcus Chen, Homeland Security Investigations. I'm calling regarding a report you filed with the FBI about potentially classified government property." His voice was clipped, professional, the tone of someone who delivered bad news too many times to soften it anymore. "I filed a report with a colleague about stolen watches. The Rolex Submariner listed in your report is flagged in our database. It's connected to a classified operation from 1983. The watch case contains materials that should never have left federal custody. If it's been sold, we have a potential breach of national security." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling of my small apartment. The water stain in the corner looked like a map of someplace I'd never been. How did it end up in my father's possession? That's part of what we need to determine. Can you come to our office tomorrow morning? We'll need a full statement, and we'll need access to any records your father kept about the collection. I can do that. "Ms. Morrison, one more thing. The person who listed this watch, do you know their identity?" "My sister, Patricia Morrison Chen." The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds, long enough for him to process the implications. "I see. We'll need to move quickly on this. Can you refrain from contacting your sister until we've had a chance to secure the evidence?" "I haven't spoken to her in 6 months." "Understood. We'll be in touch tomorrow with a time and location." The call ended. I set my phone on the table and poured another cup of tea, watching steam curl into the cooling air of my kitchen. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the street slick and reflective under the streetlights. A couple walked past on the sidewalk below, holding hands, laughing about something I couldn't hear. For 45 minutes, I sat without moving, letting the tea grow cold in my hands. Then I opened my laptop again and pulled up the family photos I kept in a folder I rarely accessed. There was one from 2019, taken at my father's 84th birthday party. He sat at the head of the table, already diminished by the early stages of dementia, smiling with confusion at the camera. Patty stood behind him, her hands on his shoulders, beaming with performative devotion. I was off to the side, barely in frame, holding a paper plate and looking at something beyond the photographer's shoulder. The next photo was older, from 1985. My father in his dress uniform, me at 24 in my new DIA identification badge, both of us standing stiffly in front of the colonial house. Patty had taken the picture, and you could see her shadow stretched long across the lawn, thin and distorted. I closed the laptop. Sleep felt impossible, but I went through the motions anyway, changed into the oversized t-shirt I used as pajamas, brushed my teeth, set my alarm, lay in the darkness of my bedroom with my eyes open, listening to the buildings settle around me. 48 hours later, everything detonated. The raid happened at dawn. I knew because Patty called me at 6:14 in the morning, her voice a ragged shriek that barely formed words. "They're here! The FBI is here! Kate, what did you do?" I sat up in bed, fully awake in the way that years of crisis management had programmed into my nervous system. "Patty." "No, don't you Patty me! They're tearing apart my house! They have a warrant! They're taking everything!" In the background, I could hear the professional calm of federal agents executing a search, voices giving instructions, furniture being moved, someone reading rights in a steady monotone. "You sold classified government property." "It was just watches! Dad's fucking watches! One of them belonged to the CIA. It contained sensitive materials. You committed a federal crime. You turned me in. You called the fucking government on your own sister. I called them about the watches. What you did with those watches is on you. The line went dead. I stayed sitting on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, waiting for something I couldn't name. The call came 2 minutes later from Agent Chen. Ms. Morrison, we've executed the warrant. We recovered 18 watches on the premises. Your sister has been taken into custody for questioning. The Submariner is not among the recovered items. Do you have any information about where it might be? Check her email, check her bank accounts. She sold it. We're obtaining those warrants now. I wanted to give you advance notice that this case is going to be public. Your sister is likely to generate media attention. I understand. One more thing. The watch that was sold, we've traced it to a Russian collector in Geneva. We're working with Interpol on recovery. This is now an international incident. After he hung up, I walked to my kitchen and made coffee with hands that remained perfectly steady. The morning light was just beginning to gray the eastern sky. I had a meeting at Homeland Security in 3 hours. I needed to shower, dress, prepare my statement. But first, I stood at my window and watched Arlington wake up. Cars beginning their commute, joggers starting their routes, the ordinary machinery of daily life grinding forward while my family imploded. My phone buzzed with texts, 17 from family members, all variations of the same theme. What have you done? How could you? Patty is arrested because of you. The family WhatsApp group, which I'd muted months ago, showed 83 unread messages. I didn't open them. Instead, I called the one person I knew would answer. My father's younger sister, Rebecca, 71 years old, and sharp as a blade made of judgment. She picked up on the first ring. Catherine, I assume you're calling to explain yourself. Aunt Rebecca, Patty is in federal custody. Did you know that? Your sister, your blood, arrested like a common criminal because you couldn't keep family business private. She stole classified government property and tried to sell it internationally. That's not family business, that's a federal crime. It's watches, Catherine, old watches from your father's collection. You could have handled this quietly. You could have been an adult about it. Instead, you called the authorities like some vindictive. The Rolex contains intelligence materials that could compromise CIA assets. If it had gone to the wrong buyer, people would die, real people with real families. Always so dramatic, always so certain you're right. Your father would be ashamed of you. Something in my chest tightened. A physical sensation like a fist closing around something fragile. But my voice remained level, neutral. The voice I'd used in briefings when generals tried to intimidate me with their volume. My father put a codicil in his will specifically to prevent Patty from doing exactly what she did. He knew. Even with dementia, he knew she couldn't be trusted with this. You've destroyed your sister's life over objects, over things. What kind of person does that? The kind who took an oath to protect national security. The kind who believes actions have consequences. The kind Dad raised me to be. Rebecca's breath rattled through the phone speaker, harsh and bitter. You're not welcome at Thanksgiving this year. I'm making that decision for the whole family. We don't want you there. I understand. I doubt you understand anything, Catherine. I doubt you ever have. The line went dead. I set my phone face down on the counter and finished my coffee in silence. The machine beeped twice, signaling the pot was empty. I rinsed my cup, placed it in the dish rack, and went to shower. The water ran hot enough to hurt. I stood under the spray and let it beat against my shoulders, washing away nothing that mattered. At 9 o'clock, I sat in a conference room at the Homeland Security Investigations Field Office in Fairfax, a windowless space with government beige walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Agent Chen sat across from me, joined by Agent Sarah Rodriguez from the FBI, and a woman from the State Department whose name I didn't catch. Ms. Morrison, walk us through your father's acquisition of the Submariner. What I know comes from a conversation we had in 2019, before the dementia progressed. He said the watch was recovered from an operation in Beirut in 1983. A CIA operative named David Brennan was killed during an intelligence extraction. The watch was found at the scene. My father was part of the recovery team. He kept it as evidence initially, but the case was classified and eventually sealed. Somehow it ended up in his personal collection. Was he authorized to retain it? I don't know, his records might clarify that, but they're still at the house in McLean. I can provide access. Agent Rodriguez leaned forward, her dark eyes sharp with the intensity of someone who loved puzzles more than people. The watch case contains a microfilm. Did your father ever mention that? No, but he told me never to open it. He said it was sealed for a reason. The microfilm contains the identities of 15 CIA assets who were active in the Middle East in the early 80s. Those identities were supposed to have been extracted and destroyed when the operation was compromised. Instead, they've been sitting in your father's watch cabinet for 40 years. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the table, forcing my breathing to remain even. Are those people still at risk? Some of them are dead, natural causes mostly, but 5 are still alive, and 7 have children or grandchildren in the region. If that list falls into hostile hands, those families become targets. Agent Chen slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs of the microfilm, blown up and enhanced, lists of names in neat columns, some with notations I couldn't decipher. At the bottom of one frame, a handwritten note in faded ink. To whoever finds this, my name is David Brennan, CIA. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. These names are people who helped our country. Protect them. And tell my daughter Sarah, Daddy loves her. 1983. My throat closed. I looked up at Agent Rodriguez. You're going to contact his daughter. We already have. She lives in Oregon, high school teacher, 52 years old. She never knew her father had left a message. We're arranging for her to receive it. The weight of that settled over me like snow, silent and inexorable. Somewhere in Oregon, a woman who'd spent 40 years without closure was about to receive her father's last words because I'd made a phone call about stolen watches. Ms. Morrison, you did the right thing reporting this. I need you to understand that. Your sister's actions could have caused significant harm. You prevented that. My sister is facing federal prison. Your sister sold classified government property for personal profit. That's on her, not you. The meeting lasted another hour. They asked detailed questions about Patty's financial situation, her contacts, her travel history. I answered everything with the precision that felt like armor. When it ended, Agent Chen walked me to my car. The media is going to find out about this, probably in the next 24 hours. Family drama involving classified intelligence, federal arrests, international recovery efforts. It's going to be news. Are you prepared for that? I've spent 38 years in intelligence. I know how to keep my mouth shut. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. One more thing. We're going to recommend that the rest of your father's collection be cataloged and secured as potential evidence. That means the house in McLean is going to be tied up in the investigation for a while. How long? Months, minimum, maybe longer. I nodded. There was nothing else to say. I drove back to Arlington through midday traffic, the radio playing classical music I didn't really hear. My phone remained silent. No calls, no texts. The family had already made their decision. I was cast out, exiled, the traitor who chose principle over loyalty. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and pulled up my financial records. Retirement pension, $95,000 per year. Consulting income from the 3 projects I maintained, another $82,000. Rental income from the Arlington property, $46,000 after expenses. The 2 properties in Austin, net positive of $18,000 annually. Savings and investment accounts, $1.6 million, accumulated through decades of living below my means, while everyone assumed I was barely scraping by. Total net worth approximately $2.3 million. And no one knew. Not Patty, not the family, not anyone who'd looked at my secondhand clothes and aging car and concluded I was just another broke government retiree. Underestimation was the most valuable asset a woman my age could possess. I closed the laptop and sat in the growing darkness of my living room, listening to the building settle, to the voices of neighbors coming home from work, to the distant sound of traffic on the highway. Somewhere in Baltimore, Patty was being processed through federal custody. Somewhere in Oregon, a high school teacher was learning her father's last thought had been of her. Somewhere in Geneva, Interpol agents were negotiating the recovery of a watch that had been stolen twice. And here, in a modest one-bedroom apartment that no one knew I owned, I poured a glass of wine and toasted the empty room. To integrity, to the cost of doing what's right, to every woman who was ever called cold for being strong. My phone buzzed once, a text from Agent Rodriguez. Warrant executed on your sister's email and bank accounts. The Submariner was sold 5 days ago to Russian collector Viktor Petrov for 1.8 M, wired through offshore accounts. We're working recovery. You'll be notified of developments. Thank you for your cooperation. I read it twice, then deleted it. The wine tasted like ashes and rain. Outside my window, Arlington glittered in the November darkness. Somewhere in those lights were people who loved each other without conditions, families that stayed intact, sisters who protected one another instead of turning each other in. I wondered what that felt like, whether it was ever really true or just a story people told themselves to sleep better at night. The empty watch cabinet haunted me. I thought of my father's hands, trembling with age, lifting each piece with reverence. I thought of his voice, already thinning. These represent something, Catherine. Honor, sacrifice, time itself, measured in moments that matter. He'd been right. And Patty had sold it all for money she'd burned through in months, chasing a feeling that would never come, feeding an emptiness that couldn't be filled with purchases or loans or stolen inheritances. I'd saved lives today, protected assets, done my duty, and it had cost me the only family I had left. The math of that seemed impossible, unfair, like an equation that shouldn't balance but somehow did. I finished the wine and went to bed, leaving my phone on the kitchen counter so I wouldn't see the messages I knew were coming. In the darkness, I recited the names from the microfilm I'd glimpsed in Agent Chen's office, the ones I'd memorized without meaning to. 15 people who'd risked everything to help my country. 5 still living. 7 with children in harm's way. I'd protected them. Whatever happened next, I'd protected them. That had to be enough. It had to be. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after Patty's arrest, when I was halfway through my second cup of coffee and reviewing consulting proposals for a cybersecurity firm in McLean. The Washington Post notification lit up my phone screen with a headline that felt like a punch delivered in slow motion. Former DIA official's sister arrested in classified watch theft case. Below it, a photo of Patty being led from her condo in handcuffs, her face twisted in what the caption described as anguish, but looked more like rage. The article named me, full name, former position, current city of residence. Everything except my street address, though I suspected that would surface within hours. By noon, my phone had become a weapon pointed at my own head. 73 text messages, 41 missed calls. My email inbox swelled with messages from reporters requesting interviews, distant acquaintances offering unsolicited opinions, and strangers who'd somehow obtained my contact information to inform me I was a monster. The family WhatsApp group showed 218 unread messages. I scrolled through without opening any, watching the preview text cycle through variations of betrayal and disgust. The Baltimore Sun ran a companion piece focused on Patty, painting her as a struggling single mother, crushed by gambling debt, and an unfeeling sister who'd chosen career over compassion. They'd found a photo from 2015, Patty volunteering at a church food bank, smiling with practiced warmth while handing canned goods to an elderly man. The contrast with her mugshot was deliberate and effective. I turned off my phone and finished my coffee in silence. Outside my window, Arlington continued its ordinary Tuesday. A woman walked 3 small dogs past my building. A delivery truck double-parked and unloaded boxes. The world remained unbothered by my private catastrophe. The first TikTok appeared that afternoon. I didn't see it immediately because I deleted the app months ago, but Agent Rodriguez called to warn me it was spreading. Ms. Morrison, you should be aware that your niece has posted a video about the case. It's gaining significant traction. I can't tell you what to do with that information, but you should know it's out there. I found it on my laptop 20 minutes later. Chloe sat in her car, makeup deliberately understated to suggest authenticity, lighting positioned to catch the tears she'd summoned for the camera. Her voice carried the practiced tremor of someone who'd rehearsed grief until it sounded spontaneous. Story time. My aunt destroyed my mom over watches. My grandfather, a war hero who dedicated his life to this country, left 23 vintage watches when he died. My mom, who sacrificed everything to raise me and my brother, sold a few because she's drowning in debt. Not luxury debt, real debt. The kind that keeps you awake at night wondering if you'll have electricity next month. My aunt, who spent her whole career chasing promotions instead of relationships, who has a government pension and savings while my mom has nothing, called Homeland Security on her own sister. Not a lawyer, not a mediator. Federal agents with guns. Now my mom is facing 20 years in federal prison. For what? For trying to survive? For making one desperate decision? This is what happens when career women forget that family matters more than rules. When they get so obsessed with being right that they forget how to be human. My aunt is rich. She could have helped. She could have bought those watches if they mattered so much. Instead, she chose destruction. I hope karma finds her. I really do. The view counter spun upward as I watched, 2.3 million in less than 24 hours. The comments section scrolled past in a blur of rage and support. Your aunt is heartless. Career women always think they're better than everyone else. She probably hates your mom for having kids when she couldn't. Cold bitch chose watches over family. But scattered between the attacks were other voices. Quieter but persistent. Wait, the watches contain classified intel? That's not just family drama. If your mom committed a federal crime, maybe there's more to this story. Why is she on TikTok instead of getting a lawyer for her mom? Chloe had pinned a second video to her profile. This one, a tearful plea for legal fund donations. The GoFundMe link in her bio had already raised $18,000. I closed the laptop and walked to my window. The November afternoon was fading into early darkness, the kind of gray twilight that made everything look slightly unreal. A memory surfaced unbidden. Chloe at 6 years old, visiting my apartment after Richard's funeral in 2018, asking me in a small voice why I wasn't crying. Aunt Kate, don't you miss Uncle Richard? Every second of every day. Then why aren't you sad? I am sad. I just don't need to show everyone how sad I am. She'd nodded like she understood, but I'd seen it in her eyes even then. The judgment forming, the conclusion that I was defective in some fundamental way. Patty had reinforced it for years, her comments delivered with surgical precision at family gatherings. Kate's just like that, emotionally unavailable. It's why her marriage was so cold. It's why Richard worked himself to death just to have something to focus on besides coming home to her. My phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line read, "Consulting Contract Termination." The cybersecurity firm in McLean had decided to pursue other expertise for their project. They thanked me for my interest and wished me well in my future endeavors. The subtext was clear. They'd Googled my name and wanted nothing to do with the controversy. 2 more termination emails arrived before sunset. Projects I'd been working on for months. Income I'd counted on, relationships I'd built through careful competence, all dissolved because I'd reported a federal crime. The doxing started that evening. Someone posted my building address on Twitter with the caption, "Here's where the heartless sister lives if anyone wants to express their feelings in person." My landlord, who didn't know I owned the building, who paid rent to a property management company I'd hired specifically for anonymity, called in a panic. "Ms. Morrison, I'm getting calls. People asking about you, some of them threatening. I don't want trouble here." "I understand, I'll handle it. Can you maybe stay somewhere else for a while? Just until this blows over? I've lived here 9 years. I'm not leaving because strangers on the internet are upset." He hung up without saying goodbye. Within an hour, someone had spray-painted "Family Traitor" across the front entrance of my building. The security camera footage showed 3 teenagers, faces covered, laughing as they worked. I filed a police report online, knowing nothing would come of it. Then I ordered takeout from the Thai place 2 blocks away and ate it standing at my kitchen counter, watching the street below for anyone who looked like they might be working up the courage for confrontation. My inbox filled with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, distant colleagues and acquaintances emerging from comfortable silence to share their opinions on my choices. Half condemned me, half offered tepid support wrapped in qualifiers. None of them mattered. What mattered was the message from Agent Rodriguez at 11 p.m. "Media requests for FBI comment are increasing. We're declining all interviews, but the story has momentum. Your name is being mentioned in connection with the Brennan case and the ongoing Interpol operation. I wanted you to hear it from me first. This is going to get bigger before it gets smaller." I replied with a single word. "Understood." Sleep came in fragments that night, interrupted by car alarms and anxiety dreams, where I arrived at my father's funeral to find the church empty except for his casket. In the dream, I opened it and found only watches, ticking in synchronized rhythm, counting down to something I couldn't name. Thursday morning brought the phone call I'd been anticipating with the dread usually reserved for terminal diagnoses. Aunt Rebecca's number appeared on my screen at 7 a.m., too early for anything good. "Catherine, family meeting tonight at my house. 6 o'clock. You need to be there." I have no intention of being there. This isn't a request. The family has things to say to you, and you're going to listen. 6 o'clock. The line went dead before I could refuse again. I stared at my phone for a long moment, then made fresh coffee and opened my laptop to check the news. The story had metastasized overnight. CNN mentioned it in their morning briefing. Fox News ran a segment debating whether I'd been right to report my sister, or should have handled it privately. Twitter had decided I was either a patriotic hero or a sociopathic career woman incapable of normal human emotion, with no middle ground permitted. I drove to Baltimore that evening through rush hour traffic that gave me too much time to consider turning around. Rebecca's house sat in a neighborhood of brick colonials with manicured lawns and minivans in every driveway, the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbor's business and judged accordingly. 7 cars lined the street when I arrived. The extended family had mobilized. Rebecca opened the door before I could knock, her face set in lines of righteous anger that had been deepening since her 60th birthday. "Come in, everyone's waiting." The living room had been arranged like a courtroom. 10 family members sat in a semicircle around a single empty chair positioned in the center of the carpet. Aunt Rebecca, Uncle Bob and his wife Martha, cousins Jennifer and David, 2 of Patty's friends from church who I vaguely recognized from the funeral, and Chloe, sitting rigid in a chair by the window, her face unreadable. I remained standing. No one asked me to sit. Rebecca positioned herself at the head of the semicircle, a judge preparing to deliver sentence. "We're family, Catherine. Family protects each other. Family forgives mistakes. Family doesn't call federal agents when someone is struggling. But you destroyed Patricia's life over objects, over things that don't matter compared to a human life." Uncle Bob leaned forward, his face red with the kind of anger that came from certainty. "It's just watches. Old watches our brother collected. You could have asked Patricia to return them. You could have worked it out privately." One of them contained classified intelligence that could have gotten people killed. Cousin Jennifer laughed, sharp and bitter. "Oh, please. You always dramatize everything. You worked in government, so you think you're special. You think you understand things the rest of us don't. But you know what you don't understand? Family, love, loyalty, real life." She stood up, crossing her arms in a gesture that reminded me painfully of my mother. "You don't have a husband anymore. You never had kids. You don't have real relationships. All you have is your precious career. And now that's over. What do you have left? Nothing. You're 62 years old and alone, and you're going to stay alone because you don't know how to love people more than you love being right." The words landed like stones, each one carefully aimed. I could feel Chloe watching me, waiting to see if I'd break. "I have integrity. That's what I have." Jennifer's laugh escalated into something cruel. "Integrity doesn't keep you warm at night, Kate. Integrity doesn't visit you when you're sick. Integrity doesn't care about you, but family does. Or it would have, if you hadn't thrown it away." Rebecca moved closer, her voice dropping into the register she used for maximum impact. "Patricia needs help. She needs lawyers, bail money, support. You have money. We all know government workers get good pensions. You could pay for her defense. You could make some of this right. But instead, you sit in your little apartment, living like you're poor, pretending you don't have the means to help your own sister. I don't have the kind of money you think I have. You have more than Patricia. That's the point. She has nothing. 2 failed marriages, kids who barely speak to her, debt drowning her alive. And you have stability, savings, a comfortable retirement. The least you could do is share some of that with the sister you destroyed." I didn't destroy Patty. Patty made her own choices. She spent her divorce settlement in 4 years. She enabled Marcus's failed businesses 3 times. I gave her $30,000 in 2019 that she never paid back. I gave her $15,000 in 2020. I've helped more times than any of you know, and it changed nothing because Patty doesn't have a money problem. She has a judgment problem. The room went silent. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "So you're saying Patricia deserves this? Deserves prison?" "I'm saying she committed a federal crime and needs to face the consequences. That's how people learn. That's how they grow." Cousin David, who'd been silent until now, shook his head slowly. "That's cold, Kate. That's really cold. To stand here and talk about your sister like she's a case study instead of a human being. To act like sending her to prison is somehow for her own good. That's not love. That's cruelty dressed up as principle. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's enabling." I loved Patty enough to let her face what she did. That's harder than just throwing money at her problems and pretending everything's fine. Rebecca stepped so close I could smell her perfume. Something floral and expensive. Get out of my house. You're not welcome at Thanksgiving. You're not welcome at Christmas. You're not welcome at any family gathering until you make this right. We've voted, and we're unanimous. You're out until you fix what you broke. I turned toward the door. Chloe stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood. Kate? But I was already leaving, my footsteps loud in the sudden silence. No one followed me to the door. No one called after me. I walked to my Camry alone, started the engine, and drove back to Arlington through darkness that felt absolute. The 45-minute drive passed in a blur of streetlights and the peculiar emptiness that comes from being disowned by people who'd never truly known you. The speedometer held steady at 63 miles per hour. The radio remained off. My phone sat silent in my purse, no doubt filling with messages I wouldn't read. I pulled into my parking spot at 11 p.m. and sat with the engine running for 10 minutes, watching steam rise from a sewer grate across the street. A cat slunk between parked cars, hunting something I couldn't see. Life continuing its small violences in the dark. Back in my apartment, I poured wine I didn't want and opened my laptop to distract myself with work I couldn't focus on. The cursor blinked in an empty document. My reflection in the darkened window looked skeletal, all shadows and angles. My phone buzzed at midnight, a number I didn't recognize, local area code. I answered without thinking. Kate, it's Chloe. What do you want? I need to talk to you, not on the phone. Can I come to your apartment tomorrow? Why? Because there are things I need to understand. Please. The vulnerability in her voice caught me off guard. I agreed before I could reconsider. We arranged to meet at 2 p.m. the following day, and she hung up without saying goodbye. I finished the wine and went to bed, where sleep felt like drowning in slow motion. Chloe arrived 15 minutes early, which told me she'd been nearby, working up courage. She wore Lululemon leggings and an oversized Georgetown Law hoodie, her hair pulled into a messy bun that had taken careful effort to achieve. 28 years old and already exhausted in the way young lawyers get when they realize the profession isn't what they imagined. I let her in without speaking. She took in the apartment with quick, assessing glances, the way people do when they're looking for evidence to support conclusions they've already drawn. It's smaller than I expected. I don't need much space. She sat on my couch without being invited, perching on the edge like she might need to run. I took the chair across from her and waited. Silence had always been more effective than questions. I did some research, on you. Okay. Public records, property databases, FOIA requests about your career. I wanted to understand why you did what you did. Her hands twisted in her lap, anxiety manifesting in small movements she probably didn't realize she was making. You own this building, not rent. Own. All 6 units. You bought it in 2015 for $840,000. That's correct. And you own 2 rental properties in Austin, Texas, worth about $340,000 each. Also correct. Your pension from DIA is $95,000 a year, plus consulting income, plus rental income. You're not struggling financially. You have over $2 million in net worth. The number hung in the air between us. She'd done thorough work, found records most people wouldn't know how to access. I felt a flicker of something that might have been pride, if the circumstances had been different. Why are you telling me this, Chloe? Because you lied. You let everyone think you were barely getting by. You drove that old Camry and wore Target clothes and lived in this tiny apartment. You let Mom think you couldn't afford to help her. You let the whole family believe you were just another broke retiree. Why? I didn't lie. I told people I had enough to live on. That was true. What I have beyond enough isn't anyone's business. Her voice rose, years of frustration suddenly breaking surface. Mom is facing prison. You could have helped her. You could have paid off her debts, bought the watches back, made all of this go away. But you just sat here counting your money while she drowned. I helped your mother multiple times. $30,000 in 2019 that she spent in 3 months and never mentioned again. $15,000 in 2020 for Marcus's second startup that failed in 4 months. Smaller amounts over the years all disappeared into whatever void she's trying to fill. How much would have been enough, Chloe? How much should I have given before I was allowed to say no? She was desperate. She's been desperate her whole life. That's not my emergency. And more importantly, no amount of money would have fixed what's actually wrong. The words hit harder than I'd intended. Chloe's face crumpled, then hardened again. You have all this money and you just sit here, living like you're poor, pretending. Why? To prove some kind of point? I live this way because it's enough. Because I learned a long time ago that wealth isn't about showing people what you have. It's about freedom and security. Your mother spent her entire life judging my choices, judging my career, my marriage, my decision not to have children. She called me cold. She called me heartless. She said I wasn't a real woman because I chose intelligence work over motherhood. And all that time, she was spending money she didn't have, enabling your brother's delusions, making the same mistakes over and over while blaming everyone else. I leaned forward, holding her gaze. I don't owe anyone an explanation for how I spend money I earned. Not your mother, not the family, not you. I worked 38 years in a field that underpaid me because of my gender. I invested carefully. I lived below my means. And I built security that's mine and mine alone. I'm not obligated to fund your mother's inability to make good decisions. Chloe's voice cracked. Mom says you never loved Grandpa, that you only visited him out of obligation. The room tilted slightly. I stood up, walked to the window, pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Your mother visited Grandpa twice a month after the dementia diagnosis in 2019. She'd stay an hour, maybe two. She'd complain about how hard it was to see him like that, how depressing, how she couldn't handle it. I turned to face Chloe directly. I was there every day for 2 years. Every single day. I fed him when he forgot how to use utensils. I bathed him when he stopped recognizing that he needed to. I held his hand when he cried because he didn't understand where he was or who I was. I slept on a cot in his room the last 6 months because he'd wake up terrified in the middle of the night, and I was the only person he'd sometimes calm down for. My voice broke on the last words, the first crack in the dam I'd maintained for years. I loved my father more than anyone will ever know. I sacrificed sleep and social life and any chance at a relationship after Richard died in 2018 because Dad needed me. I did it alone because your mother found it too upsetting to watch. So don't you dare stand in my apartment and tell me I didn't love him. Don't you fucking dare. Chloe stared at me, mouth open, tears starting down her cheeks. I didn't know. Mom never said. Your mother said what was convenient. She painted herself as the devoted daughter and me as the cold professional who couldn't be bothered with family. It was easier than admitting she wasn't there. Easier than acknowledging that I carried the weight while she performed grief for an audience. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant sound of traffic and Chloe's ragged breathing. What do I do now? I made that TikTok. I said terrible things about you. Everyone believes Mom's version. You learn. You learn that loyalty without questioning is dangerous. You learn that the people who seem weakest are sometimes strongest. You learn that real love sometimes means letting people face their own consequences. Chloe wiped her face with the sleeve of her hoodie, a gesture so young it made my chest ache. Can I hug you? The request caught me completely unprepared. I nodded, not trusting my voice. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me, and for the first time in years, I let someone hold me while I shook with the effort of not completely falling apart. We stood like that for a long moment. When she pulled back, her eyes were red but clearer somehow. I'm going to delete the TikTok. I'm going to post a correction. I'm going to tell people I was wrong. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. Because you deserve better than what I said about you. And because I want to be someone who tells the truth, even when it's hard. She left 20 minutes later, promising to stay in touch. I believed her about as much as I believed anything in those dark days, which is to say not much, but enough to hope. The call from Agent Rodriguez came 2 days later, early on a Sunday morning when I was still in pajamas, drinking coffee and avoiding the news. Ms. Morrison, I wanted to give you an update. Interpol recovered the submariner from Viktor Petrov's collection in Geneva. He cooperated fully once he understood the watch contained classified materials. He's not being charged. He purchased it in good faith. But we have it back. Relief washed through me in a wave so physical I had to sit down. That's good news. There's more. When our lab examined the watch, we found the microfilm we expected. But we also found something else. A handwritten note from David Brennan, the CIA operative who died in 1983. It was tucked inside the case, separate from the microfilm. What did it say? It's a message to his daughter. He talks about the intelligence he's protecting, but mostly he tells her he loves her. That if she's reading this, he's probably dead, but his last thoughts were of her. We've been in contact with Sarah Brennan in Oregon. She's 52 now, a high school teacher. She never knew her father left a message. We're arranging to return it to her. My throat closed. I set down my coffee cup with hands that had started trembling. You gave a daughter her father's last words. Because you reported those watches, Catherine. Because you chose to do what was right, even when it cost you everything. I don't need gratitude. I'm not offering gratitude. I'm offering the truth. What you did mattered. It protected assets who are still in danger. It gave a woman closure after 40 years. It stopped classified intelligence from falling into hostile hands. The cost to you personally doesn't erase the value of what you did. After she hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and cried for the first time since Richard's funeral 5 years ago. I cried for Sarah Brennan, who'd lived her whole adult life without her father's last words. I cried for my own father, who'd carried the weight of that watch for decades without telling anyone why it mattered. I cried for Patty, who'd sold something precious for temporary relief from pain she didn't know how to fix. And I cried for myself, for the loneliness that had become so familiar, I'd forgotten it wasn't the only option. The mail arrived that afternoon with a letter from the Federal Public Defender's Office in Baltimore. Inside was a formal request printed on official letterhead. Dear Ms. Morrison, I represent your sister, Patricia Morrison Chen, in the matter of United States v. Morrison Chen. My client is willing to enter a guilty plea if we can negotiate reduced charges. However, the prosecution is seeking maximum sentencing. Character witnesses could significantly impact the judge's decision. Would you be willing to testify on your sister's behalf? I understand the complicated nature of your relationship, but any statement about her character, her history, her capacity for rehabilitation, these could make a substantial difference. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience. I read it 3 times, then called the number at the bottom of the page. A tired voice answered on the 4th ring. Sarah Kim, Public Defender. Ms. Kim, this is Catherine Morrison. I received your letter about testifying for my sister. Ms. Morrison, thank you for calling. I know this is asking a lot given the circumstances. What would you want me to say? A pause, then carefully. That she's not a bad person. That she made a terrible mistake but deserves a chance at rehabilitation. That she has family who believes in her capacity to change. I can testify, but I'll only tell the truth. Nothing more, nothing less. No spin, no softening, no lies to make her look better than she is. The whole truth. Another pause, longer this time. The truth might not help her, Ms. Morrison. Then she'll have to live with that. But I won't lie under oath for anyone, not even her. Fair enough. I'll submit your name to the court. The trial is scheduled for 3 weeks from now. You'll receive a subpoena shortly. That night, I sat at my laptop and began writing. The words came slowly at first, then faster as I found the rhythm of honesty. Patricia Morrison Chen is my sister. I have known her for 62 years. She is not evil. She is not heartless. She is desperate, impulsive, and consistently unable to make sound financial decisions. She is also someone who, when I was 8 years old and fell off my bike, carried me home on her back even though I was already bigger than her. She is someone who, when our mother died of cancer, held my hand through the viewing even though we'd barely spoken in months. She is someone who loves her children fiercely, even when that love manifests as enabling rather than boundaries. I cannot excuse what she did. Trafficking classified material endangered lives. Forging documents is a federal crime. Selling property that wasn't solely hers to sell is theft. But I can say this: she is capable of change. She is capable of learning. She is capable of becoming someone who makes better choices, if given the opportunity and proper support. I hope the court shows mercy. Not because she deserves it. I'm not sure any of us deserve mercy when we face the full weight of our mistakes. But because everyone deserves a second chance to become better than their worst decision. If the court is inclined toward leniency, I would recommend mandatory financial counseling, regular therapy, and a structured repayment plan. Patty needs help, not just punishment. She needs to learn why she makes the choices she makes and how to stop. I love my sister. I report her crimes when necessary. Both things are true, and neither cancels the other out. That's the whole truth, as requested. Catherine Morrison. I read it over 6 times, making small edits, removing anything that felt like justification or excuse. When I was satisfied, I saved it and emailed it to Sarah Kim with the subject line, "Character statement, full truth." Her response came within minutes. "This is powerful and honest in a way that might actually help. Thank you." I closed my laptop and walked to my window, looking out at Arlington settling into evening. Lights appeared in windows across the street. A couple walked past holding grocery bags. A teenager skateboarded down the empty sidewalk with the careless confidence of someone who'd never broken anything important. Somewhere in Baltimore, Patty sat in a federal detention center, facing the reality of what she'd done. Somewhere in Oregon, Sarah Brennan was learning her father's last conscious thought had been of her. Somewhere in Geneva, a recovered watch was being prepared for transport back to custody in the United States. And here, in a modest apartment no one knew I owned, I poured whiskey into a glass and toasted the silence. To truth, to the brutal mathematics of doing right, to every woman who chose principle over popularity and paid the price alone. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. I deleted the TikTok, posted an apology, lost 40,000 followers. Worth it. Thank you for telling me the truth. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. That took courage. I am proud of you. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I love you, D. Kate. Nobody had said those words to me in 5 years. Not since Richard's sister at his funeral, in the kind of obligatory way people do when they're not sure what else to offer. But this felt different, earned rather than automatic. I typed back slowly, each letter deliberate. I love you too. Outside, the November darkness deepened into night. The city hummed with its 10,000 private griefs and small victories, and I sat with my whiskey and my phone, holding the strange weight of being alone, but not quite lonely anymore. The federal courthouse in Baltimore smelled like floor polish and institutional anxiety, that particular blend of lemon cleaner and fear that permeates every building where people's futures get decided by strangers in robes. I arrived 30 minutes early on a Wednesday morning in late November, passing through metal detectors while security guards examined my bag with the thoroughness of people who'd seen too much to trust anyone. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with wooden benches worn smooth by decades of nervous shifting, and fluorescent lights that made everyone look vaguely ill. Patty sat at the defendant's table in a navy blazer someone had loaned her, her hair cut shorter than I'd ever seen it, her hands folded on the table with the rigid posture of someone fighting not to shake. She didn't look at me when I entered. Her lawyer, Sarah Kim, nodded acknowledgement from across the aisle. The gallery filled slowly. Reporters in the front rows, notebooks ready. A few curious observers who'd followed the case online. And in the back corner, Chloe, wearing a dark gray suit that made her look older than 28, her face carefully neutral. The bailiff called the court to order. Everyone stood as Judge Margaret Chen entered, no relation to Patty's ex-husband, as her opening remarks clarified. A woman in her mid-60s with steel gray hair, and the kind of patient exhaustion that comes from 30 years on the bench. The prosecution laid out their case with clinical precision. Federal trafficking of classified material, forgery of authorization documents, intent to profit from stolen property. They presented emails, bank records, the forged signatures I'd supposedly made authorizing the sale, evidence photographs of the watches, including close-ups of the submariner's serial numbers cross-referenced with defense intelligence databases. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Park was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the intense focus of someone who viewed every case as a referendum on justice itself. The defendant knowingly sold classified government property to an international buyer. She forged her sister's signature on multiple documents. She attempted to conceal the proceeds through cash transactions. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated criminal behavior motivated by personal greed. Sarah Kim's defense was pragmatic rather than passionate. She didn't try to argue Patty's innocence. Instead, she painted a picture of desperation that had clouded judgment, of debt spiraling beyond control, of a woman who'd made the worst decision of her life but posed no ongoing threat. Mrs. Morrison Chen cooperated fully once federal agents arrived. She surrendered all remaining property without resistance. She has no prior criminal record. She's a 66-year-old woman facing financial ruin, not a career criminal. The court has discretion here. We ask for mercy. Then they called me to testify. I walked to the witness stand with the same measured pace I'd used walking into intelligence briefings, swore the oath with my hand on a Bible I didn't believe in but respected nonetheless, and sat facing the assembled judgment of strangers. Park questioned me first, establishing my credentials, my relationship to the defendant, my discovery of the theft. His questions were designed to elicit facts without emotion, and I obliged. Ms. Morrison, when did you first realize the watches were missing? November 5th, 2023. I went to my father's house to begin estate settlement and found the cabinet empty. What was your immediate response? I searched for documentation, found the codicil in my father's will stating both daughters must consent to any sale. Then I researched online marketplaces and found the submariner listed for $1.8 million by a seller in Baltimore. Did you contact your sister before reporting this to authorities? I attempted to call her. She didn't answer. Given that one of the watches was flagged in classified databases, I contacted a former colleague at the FBI art crime team. Were you aware this would result in your sister's arrest? I was aware she'd committed a federal crime. I expected there would be legal consequences. Park nodded, satisfied, and yielded to Sarah Kim for cross-examination. She approached the stand with the careful sympathy of someone who knew her client was guilty, but believed in mitigation. Ms. Morrison, you testified that you love your sister. Is that still true? Yes, despite everything that's happened. Love isn't contingent on approval. You can love someone and still hold them accountable. Did you want your sister to go to prison? I wanted classified intelligence secured. I wanted my father's legacy protected. I wanted my sister to face the reality of what she'd done. Whether that involved prison wasn't my decision to make. You have significant financial resources, don't you? Enough to have resolved this privately? I have savings from 38 years of government service and careful investing. What I do with those savings is my choice, not an obligation. But you could have helped your sister avoid this situation entirely if you'd chosen to. You could have paid off her debts, bought the watches yourself, made all of this unnecessary. I took a breath, choosing words carefully. I've helped my sister financially multiple times over the years, tens of thousands of dollars that were never repaid. Each time the pattern repeated. Crisis, bailout, temporary relief, then another crisis. Helping her avoid consequences wasn't helping her change. It was enabling a cycle that would continue until something forced it to stop. Kim paused, studying me. That's a very clinical way to talk about family. It's an honest way. If I'd paid her debts this time, what would have stopped her from creating new ones? What would have stopped her from selling the rest of my father's property without permission? At some point, love means letting people face their own choices. That's harder than just writing a check, but it's what she needed. No further questions, Your Honor. The judge made notes, her face unreadable. Then something unexpected happened. Sarah Kim called Chloe to the stand. My niece walked forward with visible reluctance, sworn in, and sat in the chair I'd just vacated. Her hands gripped the armrest like she might otherwise float away. Ms. Chen, you're the defendant's daughter. Tell us about your mother. Chloe's voice started quiet but grew steadier as she spoke. My mother is loving. She's generous, sometimes to a fault. She raised me and my brother after a difficult divorce. She worked hard to give us what we needed, even when she couldn't really afford it. She paused, swallowing hard. But she also makes terrible financial decisions. She spends money she doesn't have on things that don't matter. She enabled my brother's failed business ventures because she couldn't stand to see him disappointed. She borrowed from family members and never paid them back. And she taught me, without meaning to, that when you're desperate enough, rules don't apply. Where are you going with this, Ms. Chen? I came here today planning to defend my mother, to say she was a victim of circumstances, that my aunt was heartless for reporting her. But I can't do that, because it wouldn't be true. The courtroom went absolutely silent. Patty's head dropped forward, shoulders shaking. My mom committed a crime. She knew the watches weren't entirely hers to sell. She forged my aunt's signature. She was warned by dealers about provenance issues and ignored them because she needed money fast. Those are facts, not interpretations. Chloe's voice cracked but held. My aunt didn't destroy my mother's life. My mother made choices that had consequences. And the hardest thing I've learned in the last month is that sometimes the people who seem cold are actually the ones who love you enough to let you fail. Because failure is how you learn. And my mother needs to learn. Silence. Chloe stepped down, eyes red but head high. She didn't look at her mother or at me. She walked straight out of the courtroom into the hallway beyond. The proceedings continued with expert testimony about the classified materials, the international implications, the potential damage. By midday, both sides had rested. Judge Chen announced she'd deliver her ruling after a brief recess. I found Chloe in the hallway outside, sitting on a bench with her head in her hands. I sat beside her without speaking. I feel like I just destroyed my mother. You told the truth. That took more courage than lying to protect her. She's going to hate me. Maybe. For a while. But eventually, she might understand that you gave her something more valuable than false comfort. You gave her a daughter who knows the difference between love and enabling. We sat together until the bailiff called us back. The courtroom felt heavier somehow, charged with the weight of impending judgment. Judge Chen returned to her bench, adjusted her reading glasses, and looked directly at Patty. "Mrs. Morrison Chen, please stand." Patty rose on shaking legs. Sarah Kim stood beside her, one hand lightly touching her client's elbow. "This court has reviewed all evidence and testimony. You have pleaded guilty to federal trafficking of classified material, forgery, and attempted sale of stolen property. These are serious charges with significant statutory penalties." The judge paused, flipping through her notes. "However, I'm persuaded by several factors. Your lack of prior criminal record, your cooperation once arrested, the testimony of your sister, who despite profound personal cost to herself, acknowledged your capacity for change, and most compellingly, the testimony of your daughter, who demonstrated what real love looks like, honest, painful, and ultimately constructive." Patty was crying now, silent tears that dripped onto the defendant's table. "I hereby sentence you to 18 months in federal correctional facility, followed by 3 years supervised probation. You will pay restitution of $250,000, the amount derived from sold watches, to be paid through a structured plan overseen by your probation officer. You will complete mandatory financial counseling and continue therapy addressing the underlying issues that contributed to these choices. And you are prohibited from handling estate assets or serving as executor for any estate for a period of 10 years. The gavel fell with a sound like a door closing. Patty turned to look at me for the first time all day, her face destroyed by crying and something that might have been understanding. Federal marshals led her away for processing. The courtroom emptied slowly, reporters rushing out to file stories, spectators drifting off to their ordinary lives. I remained seated until only Sarah Kim and I were left. She approached my row, stopping at a respectful distance. "What your niece did today, that changed everything. Without her testimony, we'd be looking at 5 to 7 years minimum. She made her own choice. So did you. Writing that character statement, testifying the way you did. You could have buried her. Instead, you gave the judge room for mercy while maintaining honesty. That's rare." She collected her briefcase and headed for the exit. Before leaving, she turned back. "For what it's worth, I think your father would be proud." The words hit harder than expected. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Outside, December wind cut through the Baltimore streets with the kind of cold that feels personal. Chloe waited by my Camry, hugging herself against the chill. "Can I buy you coffee or lunch, or just sit somewhere that isn't here?" We found a diner 3 blocks away, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since morning. Chloe ordered soup she didn't eat. I had coffee I didn't need. We sat across from each other, 2 people who just testified against someone they loved and weren't sure how to feel about it. "Thank you," she said finally, "for showing me what integrity actually looks like. It's not about being right. It's about being honest, even when it costs you everything. You're going to lose friends over this. Maybe more family. People don't like complexity. They want clear villains and heroes. Let them leave. I'd rather be alone and honest than surrounded by people who need me to lie." The waitress refilled my coffee. The diner hummed with ordinary conversation, people discussing jobs and weather and plans for the holidays. Normal life, continuing oblivious to the small tragedies playing out in corner booths. "What will you do now?" Chloe stirred her soup without looking up. "I'm thinking about quitting my law firm. The corporate work, the billable hours, the whole thing. I hate it, D. Kate. Every single day, I hate it. What would you do instead? Criminal justice reform, public defense, work that actually matters. But it pays terribly, and I have 120,000 in student loans, and everyone says I'd be wasting my degree. Everyone said a lot of things about me too. That I should find a nice husband instead of joining intelligence, that I was wasting my femininity on a man's profession, that I'd end up alone and bitter, and they were half right. I am alone, but I'm not bitter. I'm free. I leaned forward, holding her gaze. If you choose meaningful work, you'll sacrifice money and approval, but you'll have purpose. And purpose is what sustains you when approval fails and money feels empty. I can't tell you what to choose, but I can tell you that 38 years into a career I believed in, I never once regretted choosing substance over comfort. How did you pay off your loans? Slowly. I lived in terrible apartments for years. I drove cars that broke down regularly. I ate rice and beans more meals than I care to remember. And I invested every spare dollar because I understood that short-term sacrifice meant long-term freedom. She finally looked up, eyes clearer than they'd been in the courthouse. Would you help me? Not with money, with connections, with figuring out how to break into that world? Yes, I know people. I'll make introductions. But the work will be yours. Deal? Deal. We shook hands across the diner table, sealing something that felt like a promise and a partnership and the beginning of the relationship we should have always had. 6 months passed in the kind of quiet that follows explosions. Patty served her time at FCI Hazleton in West Virginia, a low-security facility for white-collar offenders. Chloe started applying for public defender positions. I returned to my consulting work, though the high-profile projects stayed away. Smaller firms, less visible work, sufficient income to maintain the life I'd built. The letter arrived in mid-February, hand-addressed in Patty's distinctive looping script. I almost threw it away unopened. Instead, I made tea and sat at my kitchen table as gray winter light filled the room. Kate, I'm writing from FCI Hazleton. It's not as terrible as I imagined, though that's probably because my imagination went to maximum security places from movies. Here, it's mostly women who made financial mistakes or got caught in their husbands' schemes. We have classes, therapy, work assignments. I've been thinking about you constantly, about us, about everything. I was jealous of you my whole life. You were the smart one, the successful one, the one Dad was proud of. I told myself I had what mattered: family, normalcy, warmth. I told myself you were cold because you chose career over relationships, empty because you didn't have children. But I was the empty one. I filled the void with shopping and enabling Marcus and creating drama because drama made me feel important. I filled it with being the victim because victims get sympathy without having to change. You were never cold. You were strong. And I hated you for having what I didn't. Self-respect that came from within instead of external validation. I'm in financial counseling here. The therapist says I have spending addiction rooted in self-worth issues tied to being the less accomplished sister. Fun way to learn you've spent your whole life running from your own inadequacy. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know. You were right. About the watches, about the enabling, about everything. I needed to hit bottom before I could start climbing back up. Chloe writes to me weekly. She told me what you're doing for her, the connections you're making, how you're mentoring her without being asked. That's who you've always been, giving without requiring recognition. I owe you money. I owe you apologies. I owe you the honesty of admitting that I knew the watches weren't fully mine to sell, and I did it anyway. Here's something strange. They have us do volunteer work. I've been teaching financial literacy to other inmates, basic budgeting, understanding interest rates, how to break cycles of debt. I'm good at it, Kate. I'm good at teaching women not to make my mistakes. Who knew the family screw-up could teach anything useful? When I get out, I want to keep doing this work. I want to be someone who helps instead of someone who needs helping. I don't know if that's possible, but I'm trying. Thank you for loving me enough to let me fall. I understand that now. Patty, P.S. The woman in the bunk next to me asked why my sister turned me in. I told her because she took an oath to protect national security and because she knew I'd never learn if someone kept saving me. The woman said your sister sounds like a badass. I said she is. I read it 4 times, then set it aside and stared at the ceiling for long enough that my tea went cold. Something in my chest was loosening, not forgiveness exactly, but the possibility of eventually getting there. I pulled out writing paper and composed a response by hand, my cursive messy from years of typing everything. Patty, I forgive you. Not because you've earned it yet, but because holding anger is exhausting and I'm 62 years old and tired. When you're released, if you want to try again, we can. Slowly, with boundaries. With complete honesty, I won't fund your life, but I'll support your efforts to rebuild it. There's a difference, and I trust you're learning to see it. Teaching financial literacy is important work. When you get out, if you stay committed to it, I know people who run nonprofits in that field. I can make introductions, not charity, professional connections based on the skills you're developing. I loved you even when I reported you. I hope you believe that now. Kate. I mailed it the next morning. 3 weeks later, her response came. Kate, you have no idea what your letter meant. I read it so many times the pages are getting soft. I will take you up on those introductions when I'm out. I will work my ass off to prove I can be someone worth respecting. And I will pay you back every dollar I ever borrowed, even if it takes the rest of my life. One more thing. I'm sorry about Richard. I never said it properly when he died in 2018. I was too wrapped up in my own drama to see how much you were hurting. You loved him completely, and when he died, you handled it alone, because I was too self-absorbed to help. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for so many things, but I'm trying to become someone who won't keep making the same apologies. Your sister, learning to be better. I folded that letter carefully and placed it in the box where I kept important documents. Not for evidence, for memory. For proof that people could change if the pain of staying the same became greater than the fear of transformation. Spring arrived in slow increments. Chloe accepted a position with the Public Defender's Office in Richmond, Virginia, starting salary of $42,000 a year. She called me from her new apartment, a studio in a neighborhood she described as transitional, her voice electric with purpose despite the pay cut. I'm doing it, Kate. I'm actually doing it. Real work that matters. Are you scared? Terrified. And completely sure. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. That's how you know it's right. When the fear doesn't stop you, just walks alongside you. She laughed, younger than she'd sounded in months. Will you come visit? See my terrible apartment and celebrate that I'm officially poor but happy. I'll bring wine and Thai food. Next weekend work? It works. Thank you. For everything. For showing me that there's more than one way to measure success. The email from Agent Rodriguez arrived in April with a subject line that made my breath catch. Memorial Ceremony. Personal invitation. Ms. Morrison, the CIA is holding a memorial ceremony next month, honoring Officer David Brennan and commemorating the recovery of his final communication. We're inviting his family and the individuals whose actions led to the watch's return. We'd be honored if you'd attend. Location, CIA Headquarters, Langley, Virginia. Date, May 15th, 2024. Time, 2:00 p.m. This is a small private ceremony, no press, just family, colleagues, and people who helped bring David's last message home. I hope you'll join us. Sarah Rodriguez. The ceremony was held in a small conference room at Langley. Maybe 30 people gathered under fluorescent lights. CIA officials in anonymous suits, faces I recognized from intelligence community functions over the years. And near the front, a woman who could only be Sarah Brennan, 52 but looking younger, with her father's dark hair gone prematurely gray and his same sharp eyes. A deputy director spoke about Brennan's service, his sacrifice, the ongoing importance of protecting intelligence assets. He mentioned the watch, the microfilm, the international recovery effort. Then Sarah approached the podium. I was 11 when my father died. For 40 years, I believed his last thoughts were about the mission, about the intelligence he was protecting, about doing his duty. Her voice caught. She breathed through it. Last month, I learned the truth. His last thoughts were about me. He used his final moments to write a message, to tell me he loved me, to leave me something beyond just the fact of his death. She pulled out a small piece of paper, the original note, carefully preserved behind protective plastic. This exists because Ms. Catherine Morrison chose principle over comfort. She reported stolen property even though it cost her family, reputation, peace. Because of her choice, classified intelligence was secured. Assets were protected. And I got my father's last words. Sarah looked directly at me, tears running freely now. Thank you doesn't cover it, but thank you anyway. Afterward, she approached me near the refreshment table. Ms. Morrison, I'm Sarah Brennan. Kate, please. I brought something for you. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small box. Inside was a watch, not the Submariner, but an older Timex with a leather band worn smooth by decades of wear. This was my father's personal watch, the one he wore every day when he wasn't on assignment. After he died, they returned his effects to my mother. She kept this until she passed away 5 years ago. Then it came to me. I want you to have it. I can't accept this. It's your father's. Please. I've carried it for 5 years without knowing what to do with it. But today, watching you accept responsibility for choices that could have destroyed you, I understood. This watch should belong to someone who understands what honor actually costs. I looked down at the Timex, simple and worn and more valuable than any Rolex. The crystal was scratched. The band had been restitched multiple times, but it kept perfect time. Thank you. I'll wear it every day. Good. It should be worn, not preserved. My father would want that. We exchanged contact information with promises to stay in touch that felt genuine rather than obligatory. I drove back to Arlington wearing David Brennan's watch, looking at it at every red light, watching the second hand make its patient circles. On a Thursday afternoon in May 2025, I drove to FCI Hazleton to pick up my sister. 18 months had passed since her arrest. Patty emerged through the security gate thinner, hair still short, carrying a single small bag. She spotted my Camry and walked over slowly. Thank you for coming. I said I would. She got in without another word. I pulled into traffic, joining the highway toward Baltimore, where she'd arranged to stay at a halfway house. The silence stretched for 10 minutes before she broke it. I look terrible. You look alive. A laugh, hoarse and unexpected. Barely. Where will you work? There's a nonprofit called Bridges Financial. They do counseling for low-income women. They hired me to develop curriculum and teach classes. $38,000 a year. It's honest work. It's important work. Her hands twisted in her lap. I destroyed everything, Kate. My reputation, my relationship with my kids, I have nothing. You have the chance to build something new, different from what you had, but maybe better because it's built on truth instead of performance. I pulled off the highway and parked in an empty lot, turned to face her directly. You start by being honest. You start by making different choices. You start by accepting that rebuilding takes longer than destroying. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out an envelope. What's this? Open it. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000 and a typed agreement outlining terms. Interest-free. Repayment schedule based on what she could afford monthly. No deadline. But she would repay it. Kate, I can't. It's not a gift. It's a loan. You'll pay back every dollar, because that's how you rebuild integrity, by keeping promises. Why, after everything I did? Because you're my sister. And because you're finally ready to change. If I'd given you this 2 years ago, you would have wasted it. But now you'll use it right, won't you? Yes, God, yes. I'll pay back every dollar. Then we start over, slowly, with rules, with honesty. Deal? Deal. She was crying, messy and real. I handed her tissues and waited. Kate, have you forgiven me? Yes, I have. She nodded, squeezed my hand once, and disappeared into the halfway house. The months that followed unfolded with deliberate patience. Patty worked at Bridges Financial, paying me back $200 monthly like clockwork. Chloe thrived in Richmond. The family gradually softened, though gatherings remained awkward. In the spring of 2026, I turned 65 and bought myself a small cottage in Arlington, with a garden and a porch facing west. Patty and Marcus helped me move. Chloe drove up with her girlfriend Alex. For the first time in years, it felt like family. That summer, Chloe called with news. Kate, I'm getting married to Alex, and I want you to walk me down the aisle, because you taught me what strength looks like. Will you? I would be honored. The wedding took place in early autumn 2026 at a small venue in Richmond. I wore dark blue silk. Sarah Brennan came as my guest. When the music started, Chloe appeared at the back, radiant in a simple cream dress. Ready? More than ready. We walked down the aisle together. At the altar, I spoke clearly. She gives herself, with my love and support. At the reception, Patty approached with wine in hand. Beautiful wedding. It really is. Thank you for being there for my daughter when I couldn't be. She's remarkable. You raised someone remarkable. We both did, in our different ways. The evening light slanted through tall windows. Chloe and Alex danced, surrounded by friends. Later, on the venue's balcony, Chloe joined me with 2 glasses of champagne. One more toast. To women who choose hard truths over easy lies. To integrity that costs everything and pays back in ways you can't measure. We clinked glasses. The champagne was too sweet, but the moment was perfect. I drove back to Arlington alone, windows down, night air cool. My small house waited with its garden and creaking porch. Inside, I made tea and sat at my kitchen table. I opened my journal and wrote, "Today I walked my niece down the aisle. 3 years ago, she called me heartless on TikTok. Today, she chose me to give her away. I've lost things. Relationships, approval. The illusion that family always means loyalty. But I've gained self-respect. Real relationships built on honesty. The knowledge that when I look in the mirror, I see someone I'm proud to be. I am 65 years old. I am alone more often than not. I am quiet. I am underestimated. And I am exactly who I want to be. Integrity cost me 2 years of isolation, but it gave me something more valuable. The ability to sleep at night, to look in a mirror without flinching, to know that when people say thank you for doing what was right, they mean it. I spent my whole life being told I was cold, but I know the truth. Love isn't just warmth. Sometimes love is letting people face consequences. Sometimes love is standing firm when everyone begs you to bend. Sometimes love is choosing principle over popularity. I wouldn't change a single choice, even knowing the cost, because integrity isn't something you do when it's convenient. It's something you do when it costs you everything. My father left me 23 watches and a lesson. Honor matters more than comfort. Truth matters more than peace. And sometimes the loneliest choice is the right one. I closed the journal and checked my phone one last time. A text from Chloe. "I love you, D. Kate. Thank you for teaching me what strong looks like." I typed back, "I love you too. Proud of you. Always." Outside, September rain began to fall, gentle and cleansing. I turned off the lights and went to bed. David Brennan's watch ticked on my nightstand, counting moments that mattered with patient devotion. I slept deeply that night, knowing I'd done everything right, even when it felt like everything wrong. And that was enough. That was everything.